So, so something that I find really comforting, and this is something that I learned, again, by being intensely curious about what I was thinking and feeling, was loneliness performs the same function for us humans, however we are as a human, as hunger and thirst. Hunger tells us that we need to eat. Thirst tells us that we need to drink. Loneliness tells us that we need connection. We're not getting some kind of connection that we need. That is it. Full stop. Like, that's it. Anything that goes beyond that is judgment.
Yeah. Welcome to the Empowered Expat Woman Show, the place to celebrate your courage, inspire you to dream and play bigger, and support you in creating a truly fulfilled life across borders. I'm your host, Camilla Quintana, and I believe your future is too important to get lost in translation. So, are you ready to make the most of your life abroad? Then let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to tackle such an important topic that we are all very familiar with, maybe some of you too familiar with, and it's the matter of loneliness. And I happen to have just the perfect person here with me today to talk about this. Phil, welcome to the show. Thanks for making the time.
Camilla, thank you so much for having me, and hello, everyone.
Yeah, so Phil, a.k.a. the Lonely Diplomat, as he calls himself on social media, is a global loneliness thought leader. And I love that you have made this a focus in your work. And Phil is here to reconnect you and all diplomats and expats, as well as those living this kind of lifestyle, to themselves and to the world around them. Such an important work, as I said. So I can't wait to get this conversation started. And maybe first off, Phil, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your journey and how you came to do what you do today?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Camilla, for having me. It's always just a thrill to go on to someone else's podcast because I don't have to do anything. I just have to show up and be me. So thank you for carrying the load today. That's fantastic. I very much appreciate it. I get asked this question a lot, tell me about yourself and things. And you'd think for the number of times that I was asked this question, I'd have some kind of snappy, pithy response. I could give, the LinkedIn version of me, but, when I hear that from other people, I'm like, okay, I could read that on LinkedIn. And, reading someone's CV, reading, what someone has done in their life to date on LinkedIn gives you a version of who they are, or at least what I want you to see about me. But it's been a long lifetime journey for me to say proudly and most declaratory that I'm me. And I am, just this enigmatic human who is intensely curious about the world. I'm intensely curious about how the world works. And I'm very curious about how the humans who make up the world work as well. And that curiosity is kind of this thread through all my life. So I grew up in a tiny country town of about 800 people. The welcome sign says 1,000, but I think that was rounded up. And in an area in New South Wales, a state in Australia, and everyone around me was like farmers, and there were lots of sheep and wheat and kangaroos where I grew up. But ever when I was a little kid, I was just always the kid who'd be reading atlases or encyclopedias and just taking more and more and more information about the world. And it's really interesting, that kind of intellectual curiosity, academic curiosity, personal curiosity has kind of taken me to like the next place, the next place, the next place. So yeah, I think that feels like a good answer for now, is
That's a
that
beautiful answer. And it's
I'm
such an
human and
original
I'm intensely
answer.
curious.
Yeah,
Oh,
I love
good.
that. And I
Do I
think,
get extra points for that?
absolutely you do. No, and my main focus is on expat women, and it used to be on expat wives. And I think this question of, so who are you? What do you do? Is always such a tricky one to
Yes.
answer, especially when your life seems to be lived in different chapters. So I love that you
Yes.
just presented an alternative to the standard response that we often feel pressured into giving. Maybe it can be something completely different. Maybe it can be looking for that red thread that you mentioned that is, defines your life and who you are and how you live your life. And also, I guess this will give you so many other topics of conversations, maybe much more than if you just stated your profession and your, like the facts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yay, we could do
Yeah.
another episode about that.
Oh, I'm down for it, but I will say, just to put myself into wider context, just in case, or into a better context, just in case the listener and the viewer is not familiar. I have been a twice posted diplomat myself for the Australian government in South Korea and in Vietnam, and my ex-wife. I accompanied her on her postings in Venezuela and New Zealand. So I've lived the diplomatic life from all sorts of angles and continue to live the diplomatic life, even though I've stepped off it now, because once there is a diplomat in your life, you never not are living the diplomatic life, even if you've stepped off it. So yeah, I'm totally okay with having real discussions about how this life, expat, diplomatic, however it is, the costs and the benefits, and having a real conversation about it, because not having a real conversation about it, perhaps a hint of what our conversation is going to be, Camilla, but not having real conversations about it, at least with someone. Doesn't have to be with the whole world on social media, doesn't have to be with the whole world on a podcast, but at least with someone about what this diplomatic life or what this expat life means to you.
Absolutely. And I think we often stay way too much on the surface, and it's partly because we don't get to know people so well. Maybe if we're in this international lifestyle, sometimes we definitely do, and sometimes it helps get close fast with others who are looking for a confidant just as much as you are. But with many others, you kind of stay on the surface, so you don't ever get to have those really deep and really vulnerable and raw conversations. So let's dive into ours. The first thing I wanted to ask you is that loneliness, like I said in the beginning, right? So many of us experience it, whether we do live abroad or between worlds or we're at home. I mean, it is kind of a given that we will go through this, right? And many of us, I think, have a really hard time admitting it, at least to others. However, I think as globally mobile people, we are a bit more vulnerable to that. What are your thoughts on that, and why is that?
First of all, loneliness is part of the human condition. Like, I could just leave it there. Like, if you identify as a human, like, I'm 46 years old, I'm a cisgendered white man, I'm gay, and I live in Canberra right now. I am highly educated. I can a great command of language, coupled with all of that intense curiosity. None of that, no salary level, no job title, no career progression, no sort of the equivalent of like hopscotch or checkers around the world in like doing postings in the right way, in the right order. None of that makes you immune to the human condition.
Right.
Because, and loneliness speaks to our human need that everybody has, however we identify as like an extrovert or an introvert, an ambivert, whatever it is. We all have an absolute need for connection to ourselves, to those most important to us, and to our communities. And any kind of, I really want to dispel politely, but very firmly, any kind of notion that anything in life will make you immune to feeling loneliness. Like, it doesn't exist, because I tried and it didn't work. And I see it all the time. People coming to me going, but I went to this university, but I'm the ambassador, but I'm the ambassador's wife. It's like, no, you're human. Like,
right.
You're
First
human,
and
I'm here to have a chat with that human, right?
Yeah.
So what I feel that does, that realization does, that acceptance does, it basically strips everything away and allows us to deal with a really complex human emotion that of, the nearly 8 billion people in the world, there are nearly 8 billion different ways that people get to feel loneliness through their life. So there's no, speaking in generalities helps, really helps. But my way into feeling lonely, when I feel lonely, is different to yours. And your way out is your way out. So
I find that so comforting, by the way, to say that there are almost 8 billion ways of feeling lonely. It just normalizes it so much. It almost makes it like a thing, It's like, of course I'm lonely sometimes, right?
Yeah. So something that I find really comforting, and this is something that I learned, again, by being intensely curious about what I was thinking and feeling, was loneliness performs the same function for us humans, however we are as a human, as hunger and thirst. Hunger tells us that we need to eat. Thirst tells us that we need to drink. Loneliness tells us that we need connection. We're not getting some kind of connection that we need. That is it. Full stop. Like, that's it. Anything that goes beyond that is judgment.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, as you said there, Camilla, was like it's comforting to know, like, I don't shame myself for feeling hungry. I don't feel ashamed by saying to someone, like at lunchtime or dinner, it's like, I don't know, like, I'm kind of hungry. Do you want to go get a sandwich?
Yeah.
I'm not made to feel shame, and I don't feel ashamed within myself for admitting that I'm hungry. Yet somehow, somewhere along the line, like, in history, society has said, if we are to admit our loneliness, we're clingy, we're needy, but under all of that, the horror of loneliness is that at some level, it makes us question our worthiness for love and belonging.
Yeah.
And that is heavy.
That really is.
Yeah.
And we all have a fear of rejection, right? So admitting that you're lonely is running the risk of being rejected or not finding anyone there, right? To give you this validation that you are worthy of love and respect and so forth. So yes, it's really a painful dilemma. And I know that you often talk about feeling so alone in our loneliness, right? So do you have some advice for our audience of how to break out of this vicious cycle of actually making matters worse by just swallowing it all down and just stewing in this really icky feeling?
Yeah. What we deny, we feed. And when it comes to loneliness, is one of those emotions, one of those issues that it's almost like genuinely taboo. It's not something like, frankly, like loneliness is up there with talking about, like, it's uncouth, like talking about money, like talking about your sex life. It's not something that you do in polite conversation.
Right.
But the irony, and it's not like a good irony, but the irony is the less we talk about it, the more isolated we feel. Camilla, I invite you to just go back, and listener, viewer, I invite you to go back just a little while in that conversation where I said loneliness is simply a need to connect.
Right.
And you're like, oh my God, that's really freeing.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Because from that, like knowing that we all get it, that's the way forward. So to come back to your question, loneliness thrives on silence. Loneliness loves things like judgment and regret. It feasts on that. And there's a very real reason why I said that I'm intensely curious. So if we imagine, those games where, a small fish is eaten by a slightly bigger fish, and then, that kind of thing. There's loneliness feeds off judgment. Judgment cannot survive curiosity. And so if we want to beat loneliness, we need to get curious as about why we're feeling this way. Why is my soul hungry for connection? Why is my soul thirsty for connection? And how can I appropriately have some food that will nourish my soul? How can I have some liquid, knowing that not all food is nourishing, knowing that all liquid is not nourishing? Exactly. I could be thirsty and go and, drink an entire beer. Like, that has consequences. I could be lonely and reach for my phone and scroll social media. That has consequences.
Yeah.
Not all connection, just like not all food or liquids are the same.
And also, like you alluded to before, right? Not everything that would feel good to you might feel good to me. So it is really about being so curious about ourselves and finding what is it that I need in those times. So I guess the reframe that you just offered us is that instead of saying to yourself, I'm so lonely, is to ask why and how. Why do I be curious? And how can I nourish myself now to get out of this, right? Or to move through this. Okay, so why and how, not just the statements, people.
And such a good point. And one of the things that we can do is, if we go, like, when I first realized that I was lonely, there was nothing. This is in 2016. I was on a diplomatic posting in Korea. And I kind of thought of possibly that I might have been just a teensy bit lonely. Noticed that I couldn't say I am lonely, full stop. Like, you know, it may have just had a tinge of it, you know, a passing glance kind of thing. And I Googled, kind of like what we would all do. And I Googled loneliness. And the only information that I saw, Camilla, was for the elderly and the bereaved.
Right.
And I was 39 years old and, you know, a diplomat. There was nothing there for me that I resonated with. And then I typed in loneliness and diplomats. And there was one article from a British newspaper, and that was it. There was nothing. And then I called my employing agency's counselling service, you know, one of those services that you get like a 10-minute free call and things. And I was met with pity. Oh, you poor thing, I was told. It's like, don't give me pity.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't give me pity. Frankly, I've called you to fix it. But of course, like, little was I to know that it couldn't be fixed in a 10-minute call. But I really wanted it to be. And then what happened on top of that was that I got exactly the same advice from the counsellor that I could see on Google. And the advice was, you've just got to put yourself out there. And for me, and this is my invitation to you, Camilla, and to the audience, this is really important. When it comes to loneliness, that advice is great. Put yourself out there. However, we can focus on the put yourself out there, on the out there bit, which then essentially, if you're trying to do connection in a way that puts that responsibility onto other people to fill your connection bucket, so to speak, that's a lot of responsibility that you're giving away to someone else.
And a lot of power you're giving away.
Yeah, who may or may not know you from a bar of soap because you live the diplomatic life. Like you're not home.
Yeah.
And then when you are home, between postings, you don't really feel at home because home's changed. So you're home, like you're never really home. So it's never really a good time to have like your breakdown or your personal crisis, loneliness or otherwise. But then the advice was like, or the advice is put yourself out there. I learned, and this is what I do through my work, is you have to put yourself out there. And the logo of my work is 3 pillars, and it speaks to the 3 pillars of connection. And each of these 3 pillars needs to be as strong as the other for you to feel connection. And the first is connection to self. You have to know who you are and then be who you are. It's not just enough to know, you have to be who you are. And that's terrifying. That takes courage. That sounds wonderful. But if someone could please tell me a way that actually isn't scary and meets with good judgment all the time, then I'm all ears. Please tell me. I'd love to know.
And especially when you're moving, right? I actually, just like a little side note now, because you're very inspiring. I actually recorded a podcast episode about this, and it was about how I believe my international lifestyle contributed to me being a people pleaser, which I already was before, but it accentuated that because you find yourself in a new environment. You're so eager to connect, to avoid that feeling of loneliness. And so you try to fit in the mold. You try to tell people a little bit, like it doesn't necessarily feel so inauthentic to you in the moment, but then looking back, you're like, oh my God, how much pressure did I put on myself? Why wasn't I just like, hey, this is me. So if you want to talk to me, you're welcome. If you don't, you don't, right? I think as soon as you feel this pressure to get some kind of outcome of a connection, you're already changing your authentic ways. Um, yeah. So go on.
I have a lot of thoughts about people pleasing because it's a very common way that we try and make friends in exactly the way that you said, including in the way that you said there, Camilla. It's a little sinister, to be honest, to be very frank. People pleasing is sinister because we're entering others into social contracts that they don't know yet, that they haven't signed up for, but we've committed them to it in return for us being lovely. And these are heavy words, but I'm a reforming people pleaser, like some days better than others, but I'm a cunning social manipulator. And, you know, and these little bargains that I just completely make up in my head that I commit other people in my life, maybe who are not even in my life to. Like, if I do this, you must do that back. And if you don't do that, I'm crushed.
Yeah.
But, oh, well, I will never show it. I will never tell you. I'll just keep on showing up, but I'm crushed until I just explode. Probably not even on the thing that's really the issue. It's like it explodes to some other part of my life.
Right.
But back to the three pillars. Know who you are and then be who you are. That's all about connection to self. Then when you know who you are and then can be who you are, it sounds like an English lesson. I'm conjugating verbs here.
We're following.
And then pillars 2 and 3, connection to those most important to you and to community. They're the pillars that are outside of you. But if you are showing up to those most important to you, so your family, your friends, like your besties, wherever they are in the world, and you're not being you, if you're showing up in community, so in a workplace, in the tennis club, or, you know, whatever it is, however community is, like in the soup kitchen, in, you know, the volunteering, or like, you know, professional associations or whatever it is, and you're not being you, the connection that you get back, remember, you're lonely because you're human and you're bound to experience loneliness from time to time. The connection that you get back, if you're not being you, is not the connection that you need. It's the connection that other people think you need, and it's the connection that your avatar, your mask, is kind of demanding. And that was my issue. I was showing up in the world not as me. And so I was surrounded by people, and I hear this all the time. I cannot possibly be lonely because I'm surrounded by people.
Yeah.
Welcome to what I feel. I'm not, you know, a poet, but welcome to a circle of hell when you're surrounded by people, but you feel so alone.
Yeah, that's sometimes the worst loneliness, because it makes you feel like something's wrong with you. And actually there is something wrong with you, which is that you're not showing your true colors, right?
You're not being you.
Even if you're getting this loving attention that you're craving, on some level, you will have that thought, but are they only nice to me or connected with me because I am always this lovely friend who's always there for them, or whatever it is that you feel pressure to do? Not that I'm not saying that we should all be great friends, right? And I think most of us want to be, but it's just,
absolutely.
Where does it come from? Does it come from this genuine feeling of, hey, I just want to, you know, be there for you? Or is it, okay, well, if I'm there for you, you will be there for me. And it's just a different place. So again, to what you said about really, really knowing yourself, to the audience, right? Just go back to recent encounters and connections with loved ones and with new friends, and be really, really honest with yourself, because there is no shame in that at all. And we all do it. And we just outed ourselves here, Phil and I, right? That we do it too, or we did it and we did it too. We're recovering maybe, but we're still, you know, we'll still fall into it from time to time. And just be really honest with yourself. Like, where did that come from? Was I being authentic? And if not, what could I have done to be more authentic?
Yeah.
Speaking of curiosity, right? This will give you pages of journals to fill.
Yeah. And it's so powerful because it turns it into, oh, where did that come from? Like curious through, oh my God, I'm an idiot. Oh, how did I say this? Like this, like, oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm never showing up there again. One's judgment, one is curious. It's like, oh, well, you know, did a silly thing. I'm human. Oh, well, like, but Camilla, when it comes to diplomats, the connection to self and then being who they are is hard. It's hard for every human when we fear judgment, but for diplomats, and this goes to my lived experience, we are told that everything that you do, whether it's in the office, at home, online, everything that you do reflects on your country. Everything that your family does reflects on your country.
You know,
so good luck.
I didn't tell
good
you.
Luck with all
right. No pressure, but
yeah.
I didn't tell you that my grandfather was a diplomat, and he was a really fascinating man, but he always told me, now that rings a bell, he always told me, you are your country's business card. And I thought that was a really good advice. You know, you want to go and kind of represent and give people a good image of your country. But like you said, and especially if your job consists of doing that, it's not just the person going into a situation with this kind of, awareness. It is your job, and your job is at stake, essentially. So that is a lot of pressure indeed.
It's not just the job, it's life, because it's your children's education, it's your house, it's your housing, it's your life, it's your salary, it's all of these things that are telling you, whether overtly or subtly, like they're telling you one way or another, like it's the message that you get. You must be like the diplomat first, human second.
Yeah.
And it simply cannot ever be that way around. And my work is about flipping that equation. You don't deny your humanity to become a great diplomat, which is what I did, and what so many people do. You actually own your humanity, and that makes you an awesome diplomat.
Right. I think so too. I think that's exactly what the world needs, not just in our diplomats, in our representatives of various communities and parties and so forth, but in each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, like we can skip the second half of that equation. It's like the world just needs good humans.
Exactly.
It needs humans to be good humans.
Exactly.
And that's my work.
And I'm just reading a book now. It reminded me. It's called Raising Good Humans. And as a mom of 3 in this international lifestyle, obviously, this experience that your children go through phases of loneliness as they change schools, as they change environments, as they start over, and as they maybe feel different simply, right? It's really difficult for parents. So do you have any advice for parents on how to help our children grow more resilient? Or maybe it's that actually we need to grow more resilient first about, right? Being able to stand that, hey, you're lonely, right? Like you said, that's normal. But yes, what can parents and children alike, I'm going to say, do to grow more resilient about loneliness?
Own it, accept it. Otherwise, it will own you.
Yeah.
It will own and drive your behaviors, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
Because humans must feel that they belong.
Exactly.
Must. However we identify as a human, we all have to belong. And when we're moving from place to place to place and starting new schools, starting new jobs, leaving social circles, trying to find our way in social circles, and those social circles are constantly changing because we're surrounded by people who live life like we do. And so I equate our life like the teacup ride at Disneyland, where we're all in our little teacups and we're spinning around and like in our teacups.
Right.
And then everyone else is in their teacups spinning around on the whole floor that's spinning around as well. And so we lock eyes with someone else and go, oh my God, we're going to be besties. And then they're gone. They're gone. And, you're living in, I don't know, Brasilia, and they're in Sarajevo or somewhere, like, and you're just Facebook friends again.
Yeah.
So it's an uncomfortable truth, but I'm all for inconvenient truths now, because pretending otherwise doesn't do us it doesn't serve us. But expect loneliness. Expect it.
Yeah.
Welcome it. Almost. I mean, like, it's hardly like the message of joy, but expect it. But one of the things that I say, and this goes to the first pillar, so the first pillar being connection to self. When those most important to you and your communities are constantly changing, mathematically, the common denominator out of all of those situations in your life is you. What a gift we give our children. We've got 16-year-old twins who, now settling back in Australia after living most of their lives in Vietnam and Korea and New Zealand. The work, parenting or whatever, is helping them learn who they are and giving them the courage to be who they are in the world.
Yeah.
And it's the same gift that I give myself now. And I feel that there are so many things in our life, expat, diplomatic, stay living on the same street that you grew up in and in the small country town in regional New South Wales. There's so many things in life that you cannot control. However, you can always control you can always control your words, thoughts, and actions in response to something. And if you're applying your values, if you know your values and you commit to living your values, that seems to be something that really you don't need anything else in your backpack as you travel through life. Because then you're meeting, well, the goal is, let me know how other people nail this every time, please. But the goal is to then show up, whether you're on, Camilla's podcast. I'm going to say, I did this before. It's a daily intention for me. Show up as I am in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's the best that anyone can hope for. And that's the best that I could hope for.
Yeah. And that's the best that we can show to our children in being the example, right? So maybe also I'm thinking admitting, you know what, this transition, I also feel lonely sometimes. Make it a topic of conversation, obviously not to burden your children with your feelings, but just to normalize it and open a conversation about this.
I think that's fantastic, because even if we don't talk about it, it's there.
Yeah.
So we might as well talk about it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we feel like all the things that we feel about loneliness. We feel wrong, we feel broken, we feel unworthy of love and belonging.
Yeah. Exactly.
And That's there whether we talk about loneliness or not. Well, it's there when we don't talk about loneliness. How about we give loneliness a seat at the table and talk about it?
Right.
Because if we talk about it, it reduces its power. We take the power back, because remember, all that loneliness is telling us is that we're missing some kind of connection that is important to us.
That is a basic human need. So
It's like,
yeah.
it's like, okay, then it becomes the question, what am I missing? What do I
Right.
need?
Yeah.
Do I need time for myself?
Yeah, exactly. It could be different things. So that's, I think, why we need to stay so curious. Sometimes we look for this cookie cutter answer, or we look at what other people have and we're thinking, well, if I had that, I would feel less lonely. Maybe this is not what you need, right? So
No.
I think the bottom line of this whole conversation is really, when you remain curious, like you said, Phil, you eliminate judgment, you can move through all unpleasant feelings. They say that self-awareness is the first step. In my personal experience, self-awareness, it is a process. You cannot expect yourself to be super insightful with yourself maybe at once if you are not practiced at that, but it is a process and you'll get better and better. And for me, it's not just the first step, it's actually the ultimate step, because with my self-awareness of knowing exactly why do I feel the way I feel, or right, understanding this, comes a sense of compassion with myself, a sense of, and I think through that sense of compassion with myself, it is easier to connect with others, because sometimes we need to feel really vulnerable and able to really open up to others. Sometimes when we want to, and I think everyone has experienced that, when you want to show something to the world, like, oh, look, I got it all together, or I'm really good at my job, I'm really good as a mom. Sometimes we want to show that to others. And these are the moments again where we're feeling so lonely. And even though being vulnerable and really honest and really raw is very scary, like you also said before, it is a really great way to connect with others. So maybe loneliness is also a necessary evil. Let me just say it's not an evil, but to forge those connections that we so desperately look for.
Yeah, brilliantly said. One of the things that's coming up for me here is that it takes so much courage to show up as we are. And some days there's more courage than others. And, you know, self-compassion, self-kindness is absolutely key. Diplomats, in many instances, and myself included, are chronic high achievers. And with that comes that belief that we are somehow immune to the human condition. And it's, frankly, like, I could say something stronger than this, but it's crap. And it's crap that is dangerous. It is crap that, frankly, kills people.
Right.
When you show up, when you feel that your only option is to show up in a fake way, and you're not even allowing yourself to acknowledge how you feel, like this is taking, you know, a turn here. But here in Australia and in New Zealand, where I lived before, the number one way that men between aged 18 and 34 die is by their own hand.
Yeah.
Loneliness, I'm convinced, plays a part in that.
Yeah.
And these aren't like, you know, these are other humans. These are smart, educated humans. These are humans who are, I don't know, farmers. These are, you know, people who are electricians or carpenters. These are lawyers. These are diplomats. These are, you know, public servants. These are humans. And the courage that it takes to accept what is there, to own it and accept it, is not to be underestimated.
Absolutely.
And but there's no option. There's no option. And one of the things that I really, that my work does across the Lonely Diplomat and across the Loneliness Guy for, so I've got another site for gay men experiencing loneliness. It's giving people a tool that they can sit with themselves and with my help and like listen to their loneliness and go, oh, that's all it's telling me. Okay, right. And then we come up with a plan. But one of the things here that I'll say before I get into like go down that rabbit hole of specifics, I come out, I challenge people all the time to come out as lonely. And I come out as gay all the time. I was terrified of coming out as gay. I stayed in the closet for close to 30 years. But the judgment that I get for coming out as gay is significantly reduced, like significantly lesser than the judgment I get for coming out as lonely.
Really? Wow.
And so, you know, listeners might be somewhere on the, you know, the rainbow spectrum or not, whatever, like we're all humans.
We're all on some kind of spectrum, right?
Right,
That
exactly.
differs from some kind of mainstream, if there is such a thing.
I know, and it's like, yay, like we're all different.
Yeah.
Like let's respect that. However, like if the thought of coming out as lonely makes your sort of your throat constrict, makes your guts turn to ice, makes you like your stomach drop, makes you feel like break out in a cold sweat. It's like, ooh. Okay, welcome to what it's like to come out as gay, but also like the connection that you're looking for comes on the other side of you owning that and saying it anyway. So when we say, you know, Camilla, you and I have talked about being vulnerable. Like there's no easy way to do vulnerability. And yeah, specifically for diplomats, that vulnerability actually has two meanings. Because as a diplomat, you do not want to be vulnerable. Because the bad guys exploit vulnerability.
Right. And
use it against you. So when I come along on the Lonely Diplomat and go, hey, you've got to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. Like the answer is a hard no. Nope. No. I'll do anything else but that. Like, give me the book.
Yeah.
Let me read the blog. Let me listen to the podcast, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only way out is the way through.
Exactly. You're not ready.
And I think, and I don't mean to open a new conversation, but talk a lot about self-trust. That's one of my fundamental pillars in my work with my clients. And I think when you have a very strong self of trust in yourself, you know that you can handle even the things that are difficult. So it's not making things less difficult. They will still be difficult. They will still be painful. It's just that you can trust that you'll be able to come out on the other side and hopefully and quite possibly much stronger.
Yes.
So Phil, I feel like we could talk on for ages. Maybe we should have another conversation down the line. But to not make this too long and not lose any listeners on the way because they're, you know, all of our busy lives and so forth.
Yes.
Can you tell us where people can connect with you, follow you, learn more from you, and work with you?
I think the easiest places to find me are thelonelydiplomat.com. And I've got content on there, free content, like 60 blogs, 65 episodes of my podcast now. And they're like, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, other places. If someone is gay or queer or human, and they're interested, I can also be found at thelonelinessguy.com. And also there's a blog and a podcast there. There's also like I'm on YouTube on The Loneliness Guy, and there's a whole lot of content there, including some keynotes that I give now, and to really open up. I find, Camilla, and I've learned, not necessarily found, but one of the things that I was terrified of when I was kind of in my shell was saying something, and then there'd be that sort of pause after I'd finished saying something, and it would be like, if it was a text message, it'd be those 3 bouncing dots. And I mean, oh my God, I said something stupid. Oh God, like, oh my God. And then someone would say something and I'd interpret it as like, thank you, Phil. The grown-ups are going to go and speak over here now and stuff. What I realize that I do now is that I bring a perspective that is uncommon. And that silence after, this happened on television. I've been on Australian television recently. There's a silence after, and then people go, oh my. And that change of perspective, it's an honor to say that changes people's lives all the way through to it changes the trajectory of loneliness conferences globally. It changes the trajectory, the conversations about loneliness on television. It changes it on radio. It changes it, on podcasts. That like, oh my God, I didn't think of it that way. That's what I do. That's what I do for individuals, all the way through to hundreds of thousands of people who watch the TV show. So yeah, and like that's vulnerable. That's vulnerable, but it's the gift, and it's what I'm absolutely called to do. Because I didn't grow up wanting to be the global loneliness thought leader. I was, wanting to be very senior in the Australian public service, but here I am following the curiosity.
On behalf of all humans, we are so grateful for people like you who see this huge need in the world to be that thought leader, and pioneer and eye-opener when it comes to loneliness, and to just pursue this path. So thank you. And
thank you so
I will
much,
make
Camilla,
sure to link all of your, all of your links in the show notes. And ladies, just to let you know, this will be the last episode before I go on a little summer break. So I will see you back in the fall. And you have lots of other episodes to listen to and to re-listen to and so forth. So Phil, thank you again so much. It has been a great conversation. And I see all of you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Camilla. Thanks, everyone.